The candles flickered against the glass, and my mother's voice cut through the laughter. 80,000 for Leah's studies in Paris, she said, raising her glass. Forks paused midair. The table hummed with approval. Neighbors, relatives, all beaming at her like she'd just announced a royal engagement. My sister blushed in that effortless way she always did, the kind that made people lean closer to adore her. I watched her, the light catching her hair, the Paris brochure peeking out from her clutch. Then, almost without meaning to, I said, "What about me?" It came out quieter than I intended. My mother didn't look up from her wine. "You don't deserve any help," she said, like it was the most natural sentence in the world. No hesitation, no shame. Just truth, according to her. The room shifted, eyes darting, forks clinking softly. My father cleared his throat, but didn't say a word. He took another sip of water, his way of disappearing while still sitting right there. I wanted to laugh, or maybe cry, but my body froze somewhere between both. I looked at Leah, expecting her to say something, to soften it at least. But she just stared down at her plate, pretending to fix her napkin. Someone tried to change the subject, and the sound of laughter stumbled back into the air, uneasy but eager to resume. The roast chicken smelled suddenly metallic, and the candles felt too bright, like spotlights on a bad play I hadn't agreed to be in. I excused myself halfway through dessert. No one stopped me. My mother said, "Alice, at least take some cake home." But it wasn't kindness, it was appearance. I shook my head. Outside, the cold hit my face hard, sharper than it should have. I could still hear their laughter echoing through the window, muffled but steady, like the soundtrack of a life I wasn't invited to anymore. When I got to my car, I sat there a long time before turning the key. My reflection in the windshield looked foreign. Someone smaller, flatter, carved out. That was the night I learned something important. Love in my family came with receipts. Leah's were in euros. Mine had expired years ago. I didn't cry. I didn't even get angry, not yet. I just stared at the road ahead and whispered, "Never again." And I meant it. In our family, attention always seemed to flow in one direction, straight toward my sister, Leah. She had the kind of charm that drew people in without trying. My parents called her our sunshine, and everyone else agreed. I was just Alice, the one who helped set the table, stayed quiet, and didn't cause problems. From the outside, we looked close. We shared a room, matching beds, even matching dresses when we were little. But the space between us grew wider every year. Leah's stories were worth listening to. Mine floated away before they finished leaving my mouth. When guests came over, Mom would show off Leah's paintings or her dance trophies. If I walked by holding a science project or a new gadget I built, Mom would smile politely and say, "That's nice, dear," before changing the subject. By middle school, the pattern was set. Leah had piano recitals and art lessons. I had dishes and laundry. I didn't complain. I thought that if I worked hard enough, if I made myself useful, they'd notice me too. But usefulness wasn't something my family admired. It was something they expected. I was the background noise to Leah's melody. In high school, the difference became impossible to ignore. When Leah got her driver's license, Dad handed her the keys to a used convertible. I got a lecture about responsibility and a reminder that the bus stop was close. Leah's room filled with flowers after every performance. Mine was quiet except for the hum of my computer, where I spent hours building simple programs and fixing problems no one else cared about. Computers made sense to me. Code didn't lie. If something didn't work, there was always a reason, a missing symbol, a wrong command. But it could be fixed. People weren't like that. I could follow every rule, every expectation, and still come up short. When I entered a citywide robotics competition and won, I thought maybe this would change things. I came home smiling, the trophy cold in my hands. Mom glanced at it and said, "That's great, but don't let hobbies distract you from real goals." Leah walked in wearing a new dress, and just like that, the moment vanished. They made dinner plans, to celebrate her, of course. I left my trophy on the kitchen counter. No one mentioned it again. That quiet disappointment settled into me, layer by layer. I stopped expecting fairness. I focused on what I could control: school, part-time work, learning every bit of coding I could. I didn't need applause. I just wanted to feel real. Sometimes I'd hear my parents on the phone, bragging about Leah's charm, her future in design, her easy beauty. My name rarely came up. If it did, it was followed by, "Alice? Oh, she's doing her computer thing." That phrase, her computer thing, was how they kept me small. But even small things can grow in silence. One night, sitting under the dim light of my desk lamp, I understood the truth I'd been avoiding. In our home, Liao was light, and I was the quiet shadow that kept it from blinding anyone. The rain started the moment I stepped outside that night, as if the city wanted to wash everything clean. My shoes sank into puddles, the cold air biting my skin, but I didn't hurry. I just needed distance, from their laughter, from that house, from every word that had made me feel small. By the time I reached my car, my hair was soaked, but I didn't care. I sat behind the wheel, hands gripping it so tight my knuckles went white. For once, there was no anger, just a steady quiet inside me. Seattle's streets glimmered under the rain. Headlights blurred against the wet asphalt, and every red light stretched longer than usual. I drove without music, without direction, just following the glow of street lamps. Somewhere between downtown and my apartment, I realized I had no one to call. No one who would notice if I didn't make it home. That thought didn't scare me, it felt like freedom. When I got inside, the apartment felt smaller than usual, but real. My phone buzzed a few times, missed calls from my mother, a message from Leah filled with hearts and excuses. I stared at the screen, then opened my contacts list. For a moment I hesitated, finger hovering over the names. Then I pressed delete on each one. Mom. Dad. Leah. Gone. The silence that followed wasn't sad, it was clean, like cutting a thread that had been choking me. I opened my laptop and created a new folder on the desktop. I named it Life Plan. It sounded simple, but to me it was everything. Inside, I wrote a single sentence. I will build something that belongs only to me. I didn't know how yet, but I knew I would. The next morning, I started early. I picked up an extra shift at the bookstore where I worked weekends, then took a night job at a small tech repair shop. During the few hours I had left, I coded. Sometimes until dawn. My fingers ached, my eyes burned, but each line of code felt like a small rebellion. Every dollar I saved felt like proof that I could survive without their approval. Days blurred into weeks. I stopped checking social media, stopped trying to explain myself to anyone. My meals were simple: instant noodles, coffee, the occasional sandwich. I learned to live with little and want even less. The city became my companion. Its noise filled the gaps where family once lived. One night, after finishing a freelance project, I looked around my room. The desk was covered in cables and notes, the glow of the monitor lighting up the walls. I felt something new: control. For the first time, my future wasn't tied to anyone else's permission. Outside, the rain began again, soft and steady. I watched it fall through the window and whispered to myself, when people leave holes, data fills them. I didn't fully understand what I meant yet, but it sounded right. It meant that logic could replace pain, that systems could make sense of what love never did. And in that quiet room, with the hum of my laptop and the rain against the glass, I finally felt like I was beginning. Not running away, but walking towards something that was mine. I started at the small startup, unsure if anyone would notice me, but I threw myself into every project like it was a challenge I had to conquer alone. The office was tiny, the pay modest, but it didn't matter. For the first time, my skills, my hours, my ideas counted for something outside the family I'd left behind. Arjun, a senior developer with an eye for talent, began noticing me. He asked for my opinion on the code, challenged my solutions, and celebrated the little wins. It was different from home. Here, effort wasn't ignored, and success wasn't reserved for someone else. I realized I could build something that wasn't dependent on anyone else's approval. Together, we started working on Wavefinder, a logistics tool to streamline deliveries for small businesses. Every time I fixed a bug, optimized a function, or wrote clean code that ran flawlessly, it felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. It was more than work. It was a quiet rebellion. Each solved problem was proof that I could create value, influence outcomes, and be recognized for my own abilities. Therapy with Dr. Monroe helped me name what I had lived through. She called it conditional love and emotional invalidation. It was why I doubted my worth, why praise always felt temporary, why I had spent years shrinking for someone else's comfort. Hearing it out loud gave me perspective. It didn't erase the past, but it made my choices clearer. I didn't have to wait for love or recognition to be earned from anyone else. I could define my own worth. I started turning every skill, every success into a strategy. Usefulness became power, and power became freedom. I focused on creating tools, leading projects, and mentoring new team members. Slowly, people began to rely on me not just for the work I did, but for the judgment and vision I brought. Wayfinder's success grew beyond our expectations. The startup began attracting attention from clients who valued efficiency, transparency, and smart engineering. I learned to negotiate, to lead, to envision the bigger picture. My hours weren't just about coding. They were about creating a space where my contributions mattered, where effort and intellect weren't invisible. Eventually, the company asked me to take on the role of CTO. Being co-founder was unexpected, yet it felt natural. I wasn't just part of a team. I was shaping the direction, setting the standard, and creating a culture that valued results over appearances. Every line of code, every plan, every strategy reflected a life lived on my terms. For the first time, I felt control over my story. It wasn't loud or dramatic. It was steady, earned, undeniable. I realized I didn't need validation from the people who had dismissed me. I had built something that proved my worth, something lasting. Quiet triumph was sweeter than applause ever could be, because this time, it belonged entirely to me. 3 years had passed, and Wayfinder Labs had quietly become a recognized name in sustainable logistics. The growth was steady, reliable, nothing flashy, but it carried a sense of accomplishment I hadn't felt anywhere before. Clients trusted us, employees respected the systems we built, and I felt the weight of real influence, earned entirely on merit. I never posted updates or celebrated publicly. Social media announcements felt hollow, and I wanted my achievements to mean something more than applause from strangers. I avoided family completely. The past didn't need reminders, and their opinions held no power over my present. My focus was on the work, on refining systems, and on keeping everything I had built intact and purposeful. When I finally decided to buy a place of my own, it had to reflect what I wanted: simplicity, order, and calm. The house near Lake Union wasn't extravagant, but it overlooked the water and the trees, offering space to breathe. Mornings became my own, with coffee on the balcony and the lake stretching quietly below. I arranged the rooms to feel open and functional, a reflection of the life I had constructed, controlled, intentional, and free from interference. In the living room, I hung a small framed green bus pass from my teenage years. It was a token of early independence, a reminder of nights spent commuting, learning, and saving pennies for necessities. That tiny piece of plastic symbolized more than transportation. It represented determination, the ability to survive without relying on anyone else, and a promise to myself that I would chart my own course. Friends noticed a difference in me, a calm certainty I hadn't had before. Decisions came faster, without hesitation. I no longer questioned whether I belonged in rooms of power or influence. I had earned my place quietly, steadily, and I didn't need recognition to feel validated. The work itself, the results, the competence became enough. Weekends were spent exploring the city, walking the lake paths, or simply staying indoors reading and coding. There was a freedom in solitude, a richness I had never experienced in the shadows of family expectations. I understood now that absence didn't mean loneliness. Silence didn't mean rejection or emptiness. Silence could be deliberate, a statement, a sanctuary. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the water, I leaned against the railing of my balcony and realized how far I had come. The chaos, the comparisons, the constant judgments of the past, none of it followed me here. I had built my own world, quietly and with intention, without asking for approval or permission from anyone. For the first time, silence didn't mean absence. It meant peace. One quiet Saturday, my phone rang. It was Leah. Her voice trembled, sharp with surprise and a strange mix of envy and panic. She had seen my name engraved on the gate of my new house in Medina, and suddenly the past I had carefully left behind felt like it was rushing back. I listened, letting her words fill the room, but I didn't respond with emotion. I had learned long ago that reactions could be used against you. By mid-morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from Mom and Dad poured in, each one dripping with the weight of guilt and expectation. They asked how I was, reminded me of family ties, and hinted that I should be there, because family mattered. Their words were polished, polite, but beneath the surface, I recognized the familiar pattern, control disguised as concern. It was as if they were testing if I had forgotten who I was and who they wanted me to be. Then a letter arrived in the mail. The envelope was thick, formal. I opened it and read Mom's familiar handwriting. Leah was pregnant. Dad's job was struggling. The letter suggested obligations, subtle demands disguised as family helps family. I could feel the old weight trying to press on me, pulling me into decisions I had no intention of making. I didn't respond. I didn't call. I folded the letter neatly and dropped it into the trash. There was nothing to discuss, nothing to negotiate. Their concerns weren't for me. They were for the image of me they had always wanted. Their version of family wasn't about love. It was about utility, about filling roles. Later, I sat down with my therapy journal and wrote, "They don't miss me. They miss the role I used to play." It was a simple sentence, but it carried the truth I had struggled to accept. I had spent years trying to fit into the parts they assigned me, and now I could see clearly that those parts were never about me at all. They wanted the daughter who was silent, obedient, and invisible while Leah thrived in their eyes. Sitting there, I felt a strange calm. The past had tried to reach me, but I had already built a life that belonged solely to me. The voices, the expectations, the guilt, they could knock on my door all they wanted, but they no longer had power. I had created boundaries that were firm, clear, and unbreakable. For the first time, I realized that their absence wasn't neglect, it was a release. The pressure to please, to be useful, to validate them, had dissolved. I could listen to their concerns without being pulled in. I could care without being controlled. And in that moment, I understood fully that my independence wasn't a rebellion. It was survival, and now it was thriving. I agreed to meet my father in Fremont, more out of curiosity than hope. The cafe was nearly empty, the kind of place where the hum of machines and the clink of cups echoed softly. Outside, rain slid down the windows, blurring the streets and matching the gray weight I carried. I didn't expect warmth. I didn't want excuses. He arrived, carrying a nervous energy I recognized immediately. He tried to soften his tone, speaking as though words could erase years. "Alice, parents make mistakes," he began, his voice low and hesitant. I looked at him calmly, letting the moment stretch. "It wasn't a mistake," I said evenly. "It was math." The words felt precise, controlled. "You measured affection, attention, and resources like numbers on a ledger, and you assigned them to Leah. I wasn't missing. I was calculated out." He shifted in his seat, attempting to interject, but I held up a hand. "Don't. This isn't about blame. It's about clarity. You invested in an image, in appearances, in someone who fit the mold you wanted. Not in love, not in care, not in me." My voice didn't tremble. I felt a strange calm, as if naming it aloud was a release. I saw the flicker of something in his eyes, defense, regret, confusion. But I didn't need it. I didn't need apologies. I didn't need excuses. Years of expectations and subtle demands had trained me to read between lines, to hear what wasn't said, and to act accordingly. I didn't act out of anger. I acted out of understanding. He leaned back, finally silent. The cafe noises wrapped around us, soft and distant. I watched him for a moment, recognizing the man who had shaped my life in ways I didn't choose, who had left marks that would take decades to understand fully. Yet, I felt no anger now, only certainty. "You don't owe me anything," I said, folding my hands calmly. "That's the point. I don't need repayment, reconciliation, or approval. I don't need your acknowledgement. What I needed was to step away and see clearly. That's done." He nodded slowly, the rain pattering harder outside. I stood, leaving bills on the table and walking to the door without looking back. Each step felt deliberate, final, like closing a chapter one had carried quietly for too long. Outside, the air was cool and clean. The wet streets reflected the city lights, a shimmer of possibility in every puddle. I didn't feel lighter. I felt complete. The encounter wasn't dramatic or cathartic in the way stories describe, but it was exactly what I needed. Precision, honesty, and boundaries. By the time I reached my car, the rain had softened. I knew I wouldn't revisit that meeting in anger or longing. The ledger had been balanced in my mind. Closure wasn't about changing him. It was about confirming myself. And that confirmation was absolute, quiet, and unshakable. The night of the Seattle Education Gala arrived crisp and bright, filled with the hum of conversation and the shimmer of chandeliers. Wayfinder Labs was sponsoring a STEM scholarship, and I stood quietly beside Ethan, taking in the room without drawing attention. He squeezed my hand lightly, a silent anchor amid the sea of expectations. The crowd buzzed with excitement, speeches, and polite applause. I scanned the room, noting familiar faces, and then, like a shadow, my family appeared. Mom was perfect in pearls, smiling as though the world owed her admiration. Leah glowed under the lights, her energy effortless, practiced. Dad lingered behind, attempting neutrality, but his eyes betrayed calculation. They spotted me immediately. Before I could move, Mom approached with that familiar tone, a mix of pride and expectation. "Alice," she said, her voice smooth, almost rehearsed. "It's wonderful to see you here. Family always gives back, doesn't it?" She smiled, and I could feel the undercurrent, a challenge, a test of obedience, a reminder of old rules. I nodded politely, letting the words pass over me like water on glass. I didn't answer, didn't explain, didn't react. The weight of their judgment had no hold tonight. Ethan's presence reminded me why I had built everything on my own. Their attempts to manipulate, to shame, to draw me into old roles had no power here. I excused myself, walking through the murmurs and shifting chairs toward the stage. The lights felt warm against my face, the applause already echoing faintly from the earlier awards. I gripped the podium, letting the quiet confidence I had cultivated for years settle in my chest. I didn't need their recognition. I had built my own stage. "Good evening," I began, voice steady and clear. "I want to announce a personal donation of $80,000, specifically for young women told they don't deserve help, for those who are overlooked or underestimated." The room stilled for a moment, and then applause broke out, strong and genuine, filling the space with energy I had never sought from my family. I glanced at Mom across the room. Her smile faltered, collapsing almost instantly under the weight of reality she hadn't anticipated. Liao looked startled, unsure, and Dad's distant posture didn't save them from the clarity of the moment. The donation wasn't about revenge and anger. It was precise, deliberate, and undeniable. It spoke louder than words, correcting an old imbalance with elegance and finality. The crowd cheered, clapping for the opportunity created, for the statement made. I stepped back from the podium, letting the applause wash over me without seeking attention. Ethan met my gaze, a proud, quiet acknowledgement of what had been accomplished. The moment was clean, simple, and absolute. No speeches, no explanations, no dramatics, just a truth delivered clearly, an act of justice that needed no apology or confrontation. For once, the balance had shifted entirely in my favor, and I left the stage knowing the statement would linger far longer than anything my family could ever control. I stepped out of the gala into the night, and Seattle's rain fell softly, washing the streets in silver reflections. The city smelled of wet pavement and pine, and for the first time in years, I moved without a shadow of expectation following me. No one called after me, no hands reached to pull me back into old patterns. The silence was complete, steady, and strangely freeing. I walked along the empty sidewalk, listening to the soft patter of raindrops hitting the pavement, letting each step sink into the rhythm of the night. The air was crisp against my skin, sharp but invigorating, carrying away the lingering tension of the evening. I didn't rush, didn't check my phone, didn't look back. This quiet was mine. When I reached the car, I paused for a moment, letting the rain soak the edges of my coat. My reflection in the wet asphalt stared back, clear, unafraid, whole. There were no apologies to make, no explanations to offer, no one's judgment to carry. Everything that once pressed down on me had dissolved in this moment. The weight of expectation had been lifted, replaced by a calm certainty that I had finally reached the edge of freedom. The next morning, my phone remained silent. No messages, no calls, no follow-ups. I didn't feel abandoned or lonely. Instead, I felt the space I had created, the distance I had claimed, and the clarity it brought. I brewed coffee slowly, savoring the warmth in my hands, and moved to the balcony overlooking the lake. The water was still, reflecting the early sunlight and the trees along the shore. I watched my reflection in the glass, the contours of my face familiar, yet different, steadier, more grounded. Ethan appeared behind me, quiet as always, his presence reassuring. "You okay?" he asked softly, glancing at my expression. I turned toward him and nodded, letting a small, honest smile settle. "Yeah," I said, my voice calm, deliberate. Finally. It wasn't relief as much as acknowledgement. Nothing had been fixed, nothing had been undone, but everything had settled. The past had stopped pulling, the old voices had faded, and the life I had built had reached a place of balance. I stood barefoot on the balcony, feeling the boards cold beneath my feet, the breeze moving over my skin. It wasn't lightness, exactly, nor a sense of being unburdened. It was completion. Everything that had needed to be said, done, or claimed had been, and now there was nothing more to chase, nothing more to prove. I was finished, whole, and entirely present in the life I had earned. The lake shimmered quietly in the morning light, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to simply exist, unmeasured, untested, and undisturbed. The silence wasn't empty. It was complete. I sat in my office, sunlight spilling across the desk, the lake stretching quietly beyond the windows. The city hummed far below, but inside, everything felt calm and steady. I looked at the small framed bus pass on the shelf, a simple reminder of how far I had come. Back then, every bus ride, every saved penny had been a step toward building a life that belonged to me. Now, the freedom I had worked for surrounded me completely. The heron glided across the water, wings wide, moving effortlessly. I watched it, feeling the same sense of ease and control I had finally found in my own life. My days were mine to structure, my time mine to spend. Work, home, moments of quiet reflection. They all fit together in a rhythm I had chosen. Nothing was dictated by expectation or comparison. I had built a life that felt balanced, complete, and purposeful. My home overlooked the lake, a peaceful retreat from the noise of the world. Mornings began with coffee on the balcony. Evenings ended with the soft sounds of water and wind. I moved through my routine with confidence, knowing that every decision was my own. I didn't need permission, validation, or approval from anyone else. Every success, every small victory was mine entirely. The city continued below, full of movement and voices, but I existed in a space untouched by others' demands. My career, my home, my relationships, they reflected the life I wanted, not what anyone else expected. I could breathe freely, move freely, and focus on what mattered without distraction or interference. As I watched the heron disappear into the horizon, I felt a quiet satisfaction. I had everything I needed: independence, clarity, and peace. No one's opinion could shake it. No one's past interference could diminish it. I had created a life that was strong, whole, and entirely my own. Every step I had taken, every choice I had made, had led me here, to a place where I was fully present, fully in control, and finally free. If you've ever fought to build your own path, take a moment to celebrate how far you've come. Share your story, inspire someone, and remember, your independence and peace are worth protecting.